Imagine a leather pouch slung over a horse, rhythmically bouncing under a relentless sun. In an era before refrigeration, milk was essentially a ticking clock, spoiling with aggressive speed. This is where yogurt was born, not as a recipe, but as a happy accident. It likely happened inside a sheep's stomach or some crude leather bag, where the precise combination of warmth and the motion of travel created a makeshift incubator. Nomadic tribes in ancient Mesopotamia noticed that milk stored in these skins, or maybe even simple clay pots, didn't just rot, it thickened and soured. It was a phenomenon concentrated in the Middle East and Western Asia, where the contents of a bag made from a dead animal simply transformed. Natural bacteria and enzymes performed a chemical heist, turning a perishable liquid into something entirely new. Between 10,000 and 5,000 BCE, humans began the risky experiment of consuming dairy, a shift that aligned with the domestication of cows and goats. At the time, the Mesopotamian landscape was essentially a trial by temperature. For an early herder, fresh milk was a luxury that expired almost the moment it left the animal. The sun's warmth and the specific porousness of the containers used acted as the catalyst, transforming the milk into yogurt and preventing the resource from becoming waste. It was a biological clock ticking down in the heat. Now, the heat was technically the enemy, but it became the primary engine of production. We are looking at a world where the only way to keep a food source stable was to let it spoil in exactly the right way. It is a remarkably efficient system for someone who had no idea they were managing a microscopic colony. Our anonymous Neolithic herder didn't have a refrigerator, but they did have a persistent hunger. This person likely stared at their thickened, sour milk with a mixture of genuine fear and cautious curiosity. Normally, spoiled milk is a biological warning sign of danger, but the sheer necessity of survival forced a gamble. Once they tasted it, they realized it didn't result in immediate illness. In fact, it was an effective storage method. The yogurt actually stayed edible longer than raw milk. Because it was perceived as soothing for the stomach, people began to trust this accidental discovery. This belief in digestive health helped the spread of yogurt across disparate cultures. It wasn't a miracle. It was a simple biological pivot that turned a volatile resource into a reliable food source. Inside that leather pouch, a quiet, microscopic war was being waged. Bacteria consumed the lactose to produce lactic acid, which preserved the milk and created that familiar, thick, creamy texture. This process is fermentation, essentially a biological cheat code for survival. This shift allowed milk to be kept safe for days or even weeks without a single ice cube in sight. For a nomad, this was a strategic advantage. You didn't have to drink every drop immediately or watch it turn into toxic sludge. Instead, the bacteria were effectively working as unpaid security guards, protecting the milk from more dangerous pathogens. There was another unexpected benefit. Yogurt was easier to digest for lactose-intolerant people because the bacteria had already pre-digested the lactose. The milk was no longer just a drink. It had become a stable, calorie-dense food that could survive the heat of a 1,000-mile journey. The herder simply had to wait for the bacteria to finish their work. This story isn't written in ancient books, but in the chemical stains on the pottery. Archaeologists have recovered pottery shards from the Neolithic era in the Middle East and Central Asia, containing trapped residues of milk fats. These dairy traces provide a concrete, physical record of what these early humans were actually eating. It is a very specific kind of forensic evidence. Some ancient pots suggest people were already separating curds from whey to make primitive cheese and thick yogurt. They weren't just passively storing milk, they were intentionally manipulating the liquid to create something denser and more stable. They took a residue, something that would have been considered spoiled, and turned it into a staple. This is where the narrative shifts from a logical guess to a factual biological reality. Herodotus wrote about the Scythians, who survived on a thick, sour mare's milk. He described it as the primary dietary staple of the nomadic clans. They didn't see it as spoiled, they saw it as a tool for endurance. This trend of eating soured milk was global. In Rome, the elite and the commoners alike enjoyed a rustic, healthful soured milk called oxygala, which they viewed as a source of physical strength. Meanwhile, in India, the Vedas praised yogurt and honey as the food of the gods. This wasn't just a recipe, it was spiritual. Ayurveda valued yogurt for its digestive benefits, treating it more as a medicine than a snack. It is quite strange that humans across different continents independently decided that making milk go sour was the same as making it safer. They simply accepted that a thick, pungent scent was a sign of quality rather than a warning of poison. It takes a very specific kind of curiosity to eat something that smells like it should kill you and then decide it is divine. The Turks eventually gave yogurt its name, derived from the word yurmak, meaning to thicken or curdle. In Ottoman Turkish, this evolved into yogurt, based on the root yogurmak, meaning to knead. For Turk nomads, this wasn't a medical miracle, but a practical dietary staple, eaten plain, stirred into soups, or consumed as a drink. It eventually found its way into the royal courts of Europe, though the method of arrival was somewhat absurd. One account tells of King Francois I of France, who was suffering from severe diarrhea. His Turkish ally, Suleiman the Magnificent, suggested yogurt as a remedy. According to this story, that is how yogurt arrived in the French court. A king of France and a sultan of the Ottoman Empire collaborating on the health of a royal digestive tract. It is a very precise way to introduce a lumpy, soured milk product to high society. In 1905, Stamen Grigorov, a Bulgarian scientist, brought a clay pot of homemade yogurt to the Medical University of Geneva. While studying the sample, he isolated the key bacterium responsible for the texture, which he identified as Lactobacillus bulgaricus. Then came Elie Mechnikov, a Russian biologist. In the early 1900s, he became fascinated by the long-lived Bulgarian peasants who consumed vast amounts of fermented milk. He didn't just observe them, he theorized that the bacteria in yogurt displaced harmful gut microbes, which in turn promoted longevity. Mechnikov, a Nobel Prize winner, and that's where it gets interesting, he detailed this in his 1908 book, The Prolongation of Life. He argued that fermented foods were the secret to the extended lifespans of these peasants. He essentially shifted the yogurt experience from a folk remedy to a scientific study of the gut microbiome. It was a matter of bacteria displacing other bacteria, and Mechnikov's work provided the biological foundation for the modern probiotic movement. By the early 20th century, yogurt had transitioned from a nomadic staple to an exotic health food. In Europe and America, it was often sold in pharmacies, not supermarkets, marketed as a medicinal cure. Isaac Carasso founded Danone in Spain in 1919 to produce yogurt specifically for children's health. It was a niche pharmaceutical product. Then Daniel Carasso brought the Danone business to France and later to New York. For a while, it remained a specialized health product for the concerned few. That changed in 1947 when Danone added strawberry preserves to sweeten the taste. This simple addition of sugar and fruit transformed it from a medicinal remedy into a popular snack. It moved from the pharmacy shelf to the supermarket aisle, trading its medicinal reputation for a flavor profile that appealed to children. Today, the accidental discovery of a leather pouch has evolved into a multi-billion-dollar global industry. You can find Greek yogurt, Australian drinkables, and plant-based alternatives in almost every single supermarket on Earth. The culinary map is just as diverse as the bacteria that started it. In India, you have raita. In the Middle East, you'll find labne. In Greece, there is tzatziki. It is a simple biological process that began as a desperate way to survive the heat of the Mesopotamian desert, and now it is simply a line item on a daily grocery list. It all comes back to those early nomads who decided that something smelling like a ruined pouch of milk was actually a feast. It is a strange biological irony that our modern health obsession with probiotics began with a sheep's stomach bouncing on a horse's back. We now spend money on carefully cultured supplements to achieve the same result that a Neolithic herder got for free by simply forgetting a bag of milk in the sun. We've moved from the leather pouch to the sterile plastic cup, but the core mechanism remains identical. We are paying for the privilege of eating controlled spoilage. The most absurd part is that the very thing that once signaled a food source was ruined is now marketed as a way to extend our lives. We are essentially eating a prehistoric accident, refined and sweetened, sold back to us as science. All of this started because someone, thousands of years ago, was hungry enough to eat something that smelled like a mistake.